Hey everybody, this is Mike. I thought I'd bring you a pizza crust that I doubt if it's original, but I had just kind of put it together. I had found I didn't care for won't say I didn't care for the fathead pizza crust, which used almond flour or the cauliflower. I wanted something a little easier, a little faster, didn't take as much ingredients. And so I decided to just do something with mozzarella cheese, Parmesan cheese, and egg. I was able to make a crust. Now you can shred this up in a food processor, but I found that I tend to I like grating it myself. I don't like using the big grater. I like a smaller grater with a smaller hole. I feel like it works a little bit better uh, when I'm making the dough. I, well, not really a dough, but we'll call it a dough for all intents and purposes. But of course, it takes a little bit of effort to grind. What is it? I think it's a 16-ounce block. It takes 2 cups of cheese, which is 8 ounces for the crust. The other half of the block I save for the topping. Uh, and let's see, for the Parmesan, uh, which is not a block. I actually buy bagged Parmesan. I don't like to use shredded cheese when it comes to the other cheeses because they used starches in order to keep them separated. So that's why I like to grate them myself instead of purchasing them. Uh, and I think it's worth it, but I guess because Parmesan is something of a harder cheese, they do not use any starch whatsoever to separate the Parmesan, so you can buy bagged Parmesan. But it's also comes in a slightly smaller bag. So it's so instead of like 8 ounces, it'll be something like about 6 ounces. Now, of course, I like to weigh it out, and I'll weigh out 8 ounces of mozzarella here, and I'll weigh out I'll weigh out the mozzarella. Then I'll also weigh out the Parmesan, which will let's see, 8 ounces of Parmesan, 4 ounces of, or I'm sorry, 8 ounces of mozzarella, 4 ounces of Parmesan, which will equal 12 ounces. Now, I also have discovered I can use this recipe for like noodles. Now, I mean like lasagna noodles. I've made lasagna before. I find I like it better than some of the other things I've tried. Now, of course, I have to do things a little bit differently. I don't cook it as long as I cook a pizza crust, and I also spread it out thinner. And I don't use quite as much Parmesan. I'll use instead of 4 ounces, I'll use 3 ounces. But then I'll also double it up because I'll use two baking sheets to make my noodles. So so it ends up working out pretty good. I just like to cook it till it's lightly brown. This I'll get more brown. And as you'll notice, this is just the Kroger brand of Parmesan. Nothing super fancy, but it's still everything so far is zero carb. Um, and like I said, there is no starches separating the grated Parmesan in the bag. But it works out. I think it works out quite nicely. And then after this, I will add 2 eggs. Now, I'm sorry this is a voiceover. I had actually done talked while I was doing all this stuff, and I'm sure I added a lot of anecdotal stories or whatever to it. and but I found it was very inconsistent because I only had my phone that I was filming with, and walking away, and all the time it took, the sound was very inconsistent. So I decided that I would do a voiceover, and hopefully that'll be a bit better. And of course, I probably could have cut some more of this out. I think I already cut like over an hour out of this, trimming it down. I'm sitting here being very anal retentive in my measuring, making sure I get exactly 8 ounces of mozzarella and 4 of Parmesan. Now I use 2 eggs. And then what I'll end up doing is I also add a little bit of seasoning to this. Now, you don't necessarily have to put salt like I just did, but we like a little bit of salt, especially my wife. There was pepper, and that's Italian seasoning. We use that in this a lot. And then I believe we grabbed some garlic. Yep, there we go. A little garlic powder there. Now there's our baking sheet. It's fairly large. I think you get these at Sam's. And I like to we lay parchment paper down. You don't want to just do it without putting parchment paper down. Now I like to get a fold so I can get an idea of the size of the pan, because when you put this down, you would have a hard time rolling it out in the pan. So I like to make that little mark so I kind of know what I'm working with. And now here's where you're going to get dirty. You're going to have to get your hands in there, and you're going to have to mix it. So make sure them hands are clean. All right. In fact, you'll probably have to clean your hands a couple times while doing this, with all that eggy mess that you'll get in between your fingers. And let's not forget to set the oven for 400 degrees, because that's where you're going to need it. And while it's preheating, we'll keep on working. And you want to incorporate it really well. In fact, you might get in there, you might use your fist to push down through it, or whatever you need to do. But I like to get it thoroughly incorporated. This you just can't mix too much. You want to get it almost a dough-like consistency. You'll just keep working with it. Like I said, this is a fairly simple recipe. I mean, and again, you can use a food processor to grind up your blocks of cheese, and that is quite fast. But personally, I think I like the length of the of grating the cheese. It kind of helps everything hold together a little bit better, I think. Because I have used a food processor, and it does all right. But this just, for whatever reason, it's also a little bit less cleanup. I don't have to clean up a food processor. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to form this into a small circle. Now granted, the pizza is going to be quite a bit bigger than this. Right now I'm just worried about getting a general area situated, so when I cover it with parchment paper, because I'm going to put another sheet on it in a moment, I want to be able to spread it out in all directions without a lot of gaps, if I can help it. And so lay down your parchment paper, and get yourself a rolling pin, or say on a wine bottle or something like that. We've got a rolling pin here somewhere. Oh, there it is. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll it out in all directions, trying to be as even as possible, so I have as little work to do after the fact cleaning up the edges. And and it'll be fairly thin. Now, if you were doing this for noodles, like I mentioned earlier, what you would end up doing is you would want to go all the way to the ends with it. You'd want it to be in a rectangle instead of a circle, like I'm doing there, and it would be a lot thinner. That would be for lasagna noodles, and with the size of that baking sheet, I think you'd get about 9 noodles, or 9 noodles out of it. And one great thing about baking, once it starts baking, what it'll do, it'll melt and it'll settle a bit, and it'll all kind of even out. But then the longer it cooks, then it starts firming up. So it'll get soft, liquidy, then it'll start to firm up because of the eggs that are in it. But you could take those noodles, like I said, don't cook them too terribly long. Probably you cook them maybe 10 to 15 minutes. You don't want them getting too dark. But I would cook 2 baking sheets of that, so you would essentially double up the recipe using all 16 ounces of mozzarella and the whole bag of Parmesan and 4 eggs. Now, I would not put any seasoning in the noodles, since that's what you're using for lasagna noodles. But we did it. It worked out surprisingly well. I mean, I was impressed. I impressed myself. Is that what I just said? I was surprised it turned out so well. Better than some of the other things I had tried. Now again, this is different from the Fathead pizza because it uses the almond flour. Which ends up adding a little bit of carb. Of course, it adds a lot of fiber because it is almond flour. And it still adds fat, but this is all fat and a little bit of protein. The only carb you get from this crust is from the egg, and you're going to get that no matter what. And then, of course, there's the cauliflower, which of course is going to be lower in calories. It's going to still utilize some cheese, but I just, for whatever reason, it just doesn't quite get that consistency I'm looking for. And I found that when I do it like this, it seems to work well. Now we're going to work on the sauce. I'm still waiting for the oven to get done preheating to 400. Well, this isn't sauce, my bad. This is going to be, I'm going to put some Italian sausage. I bought some, froze half of it because it was a 1-pound package. At Kroger's, mild Italian sausage comes in 16 ounce package. Used half of it for the last pizza. Now I've got it, thawed it a little bit. Now I'm going to cook it for this one. Of course, I'm going to put a little more salt in it here in just a moment after I pop the crust in. And it's a great thing I got that timer going. Kind of gives you an idea of how long this process took. I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. I'm just going to start watching it. I don't believe it took quite 20 minutes to get it to where I wanted it. I think it was 18 minutes. But now I'm going to brown my sausage a bit, cook it, put salt, pepper. I already put some olive oil. Now I'm just going to break it up and brown it. You can use whatever toppings you like. Okay, this is your pizza. If you make it, you make whatever you want. Okay. We just happen to find that the sausage, Italian sausage, actually makes the pizza so much better for us. I mean, we were just used to using pepperoni, mushroom, and black olives. I mean, that was a standard for us on a lot of pizzas, but it just seemed to make it more authentic. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is, now that it's done cooking, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to drain this on a paper towel because you don't want your pizza being too soggy. At least that's the way we like it anyway. But we want to make sure that we try to get some of the grease off of it. We don't want too much. And then after we get the grease off, then it'll let it soak on the paper towel for a while. We'll end up using it for the pizza, and I'll do that the same with like the mushroom, because you'll have to drain the mushroom as well, and the black olives that we use. Now I'm not going to clean the bowl or the pan out. Let's see, a couple tablespoons of butter and some olive oil. And I'm going to kind of deglaze the pan a little bit because there is some sticky parts that are still left in there, as well as some of the grease from the sausage. And this is actually going to be kind of I guess an added ingredient to our sauce. Now I like to throw in some garlic. Now, I guess I could have went and chopped some garlic up, but for us lazy people, we just buy minced garlic. Now, oddly enough, I could make the sauce from scratch if I wanted to. I've done it before, but I found this sauce here, and it's just a standard brand ragu homemade style. No sugar added at all. It's actually very few ingredients. Almost all the ingredients are fine. The only one I have question with would be the soybean oil. Anything soybean is I don't necessarily like it, but once in a while. Now that was Italian seasoning I just sprinkled in, and here's some onion powder. I probably should have put a little bit more, but I just opened that canister and having a little issue with it. But I won't say I'm a huge fan of onion. I do not like onion pieces. The only way I like onion is if I chop them up finely and I cook them myself. I'm also adding some more Parmesan. I use it a bit as a thickener because I do like my sauce a little bit on the thick side. I'm that way with any sauce though. Whether it's lasagna, spaghetti, pizza sauce, put a little salt and pepper in there. You'll probably say, "Dear God, Mike, that's a lot of salt." Well, we eat a lot of salt. A little more Parmesan. Ironically, I handed Sue a slice of pizza, and she said, "Can you put a little salt on this for me?" Still wasn't enough salt. And of course, I added a little more garlic because I just tasted it and thought, I need a little more garlic. I couldn't find the oregano. I would have put some oregano in there, but I must have misplaced it. I was messing around with the seasonings last week and reorganizing things. But it still tasted pretty good. Now, as you can see, it had simmered for a while. I set it off the heat. I think was it another. It's been cooking for 12 minutes at a low temperature. I'm just getting all the rest of the toppings prepped, getting ready to dry them. Now, what I'll do though, after I get the toppings dried up a little bit, I'm going to add just a little touch of sweetener to the sauce, because there is no sugar in it, and usually sauces have just a hair of some kind of sweetener. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a little bit of Splenda. I'm not going to put that whole packet, but that's Splenda. Just a little bit, not too much, just enough to give it just a hair of a sweetness to it. You know, just like any other sauce. Other sauces normally have sugar. But I don't like to do it while it's on the fire because I don't want it to alter the taste. So I put it in at the end. And now the crust is ready to come out, and you can see it's been about 18 minutes. So 18 minutes at 400 degrees is what it took on my oven. Like I said, you can watch it. I could have left it in there a little longer if I'd wanted to, but I think this was actually just perfect. Could took it out a little earlier, could have left it in a little longer, but that level of brownness was what I was looking for. Now what I need to do now is I need to get some parchment paper and cover it because I'm going to flip it into another baking sheet. Now you notice how as it had melted and it spread out a little bit, and so it kind of levels out a bit now, but then it gets solid. So right now, even though it is it's pretty flexible right now, but it still would remain in one piece. Now, make sure you don't burn yourself on this. I have definitely burned myself doing pizza before. So right now I'm just going to flip it, turn off that alarm. There we go. And then go ahead and take off that parchment that was on the bottom, and that's going to be the surface we'll use for putting the sauce on. Make sure you get it straight on there. And as you could see, you know, if you don't get it quite so done, and if you spread it out a bit thinner, it definitely does look like it would make a good noodle. You could even make some breadsticks out of this as well. I mean, you don't just have to put marinara. Maybe you can put some Alfredo and maybe with chicken and mushroom on top of it to up your fat content, because now, granted, there's a lot of fat in cheese, but as far as the ratios go, they're not going to even out. The ratios are not going to match, you know, 75, 20, and 5. Okay, there's almost no carbs at all in cheese. It's usually less than 1 or it's 0 with cheese, and but like the protein. As far as grams go, there's more grams of protein than there is grams of fat in most cheeses, except for cream cheese that I can think of. Cream cheese, I think, was 2 grams of protein compared to 10 grams of fat. That's not. I think you got like a what 4 to like a. I don't know. You got more than half of your grams in protein, which is definitely going to add to your calorie count when it comes to fat. Still, you're still going to have more calories in fat, but it's not going to equal 75 and 20. Okay, so you can maybe do an Alfredo sauce as opposed to this. Now, I did put butter in that sauce. I like to get it spread out. Don't like too much sauce on this, but of course we're going to add just a little bit of parm here, just a little bit, Just a slight little layer there, using more like a seasoning. And now I'll start to build my top. Sausage first, and I'll end up using that entire 8 ounces for this pizza, which initially might seem like a lot, but after it's all down, it's like it's not too bad. It ends up covering it just about right, at least for us. But we like a lot of toppings. I don't know if you've ever been to Barano's. Barano's, love Barano's. They always put a lot of toppings on there. That's probably one of the reasons we always loved it. I don't think they have the best crust, but they definitely have. I love their toppings. And I put the rest of my black olives. And you can see how much moisture they drew out. And then now Sue does not like mushrooms. I love mushrooms. I think that's like a 4-ounce can of mushrooms, drained. And but I love mushrooms. I won't use all 4 ounces though. I'll use most of it. Save the rest for something else. Maybe putting it in some kind of Alfredo sauce or something. And now we will add the rest of that cheese, the other half of that mozzarella. Get it spread as evenly as we can here. Now you'd think that would just totally drown the top of that pizza, but it won't. So it just covers that one area. And then of course we're gonna have to put a little seasoning on it here in a second. Just let's see, where's that Italian seasoning at? Grab that Italian seasoning, give it a little sprinkle. Just a little light dusting. Just have little layers of flavor all throughout. And then one last thing, a little parm. Put a little parm on there. It's like Parmesan's like the WD-40 of foods, I think. And now this is just regular old Hormel pepperoni. I mean, again, we try to eat clean on everything we can, but at some point you have to you know, figure out your budget and figure out where you got to go to get stuff and everything. This I think has dextrose in it, but it's still zero. It says 0 carbs. It still has it still has dextrose as one, which is a sugar, as one of its ingredients. But you know, if you're really good on everything else, once in a while you can just throw a little something out there. I mean, it's like being good all the time and then going out and eating. Like I'll eat a salad. Put a little more parm on that top there. That's I promise that's the last parm you'll see on this. Okay. You want, you know, you try to be good all the time, but when you go out, you know, if you eat a salad and you get you don't know what's on your ranch dressing, in your ranch dressing, or whatever. And I like to use ranch dressing if I'm going to get a salad, because I hate salad. I hate salad. Oh, one other thing, we got all kinds of this sauce left. We'll have 3/4 of that canister full because of all the butter and the olive oil and the grease and some of the other ingredients we put in that. So we're gonna save all that goodness, put it back in that jar, put it in the refrigerator, and save it for another day. It'll keep for a couple weeks at least. I mean, I've used it 2-3 weeks after the fact. I think tomatoes is relatively acidic, so it should be okay, especially since we're just taking it off the fire and putting it straight away. because it's still hot. But that'll make a couple more pizzas. So no need to go through all that effort to make that sauce every time. Put it in the refrigerator. Ah, there's our pizza. I let it cook for 10 minutes, still at 400 degrees, and then I let it broil for a minute or two. And it's still fairly flexible right now. So you're going to have to let it cool for a bit. As you let it cool, the crust will firm up. In fact, I'm going to move it to the countertop so it'll transfer the heat to the countertop and suck some of that out of there so it'll cool down faster. And again, I let it sit myself for 10 minutes before I'll attempt to cut it. But you can see how nice the crust looks. It's fairly brown, and you got a little bit of golden color to the cheese. I could have let it cook longer, but since pretty much everything was already cooked, all I really needed to do is warm it up real nice and just brown a little of that cheese on top. And here I'll show you a little bit of that crust once I bring it around here. But try different toppings. I mean, this combination might not get you to your fat point. You might need to eat more fat. Maybe have some kind of fat bomb or something with it. Something that's going to up your fat content, because as much fat as there is in here, there's still plenty of protein. And you do want to kind of watch your protein a bit, because if you eat too much protein, you could end up turning it, and it'll convert to sugar. So you might want to up some of your fat. But you see how thick that crust is. It's still relatively flat, but it's definitely a nice consistency. Those 2 eggs really help. And there it is, cut up, and handing my wife her pieces with no mushroom on it. As you can see, the consistency of the crust is pretty good. It holds up. As it cools, it'll get even firmer, and you could reheat it. I reheated mine this morning. It was fine. Crust looks good. Hope you enjoyed this. This is the end of the video. Thanks for watching.